Okay, so after you've made your blank mug, you can take it out of the bag. Hopefully you've let it firm up a little bit. It should take you about one class period to make it to this level, right? And it'd be good to make it all in one so that everything sticks. Okay, and so inside, even though I was very careful, you'll see that there's a little bit of a seam and there's a little bit of an indentation from the tube that I had originally stuck in there. Okay, well I can take care of that. That's pretty easy. So now, if your mug is really dry, what you can do is you could take some water. I'm going to pour some water in there, swish it around. And if I did this at the sink, so much the better. And that was just to get everything sort of re-moistened in there. I don't know if this one needed it. It was pretty wet enough. But anyways, so what I've got here is I've just got some slurry or some, yeah. It's clay that's just been mixed with water until it's like, well, like a pudding or a paste, right? Very loose. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take it with just one of the paint brushes that we have around the classroom, one of the bigger ones, and I'm just going to dip in here and I'm just going to just work that around in there. Just working it into the corners, right there where that seam is. And really rub it, because you're doing two things. You're working that slurry, right? But you're also uh, physically pushing it with the brush, maybe even a little bit with the metal part around the brush, just working it in there. Really reinforcing that seam. Okay, so once you feel like you've got that pretty good, nice and smooth, look in there to make sure it's all nice and smooth in there at the bottom. Because you want it to be smooth, because it's going to be a pain to get down there and sand. Then I'll just work it up a little bit, up towards the top. I can even run along that seam that's there, just pushing a little bit of that slurry into that seam that was on the inside. Okay, in the middle, ferrule was acting a little bit to smooth that out. I could also then take, let's say, something like this butter knife right in here. Make sure it's nice and clean. And I could get in there and smooth that out as well. Another reason why I made these as big as I did is that most of us should be able to get our hands into there for sanding or working or whatever we need to do. Anyway, so I'm just going to take a second, get that all nice and smooth while I have the chance, avoiding the bottom because the bottom is about as smooth as it's going to get. And any little bit of roughness that is left in the bottom will probably be worked out with a little bit of glaze. There, and so now I've got an inside that is totally smooth, no seams at all. The bottom is totally smooth and all sealed up real good. Okay, and so now I'm ready to start. Maybe if I haven't done a drawing yet, well, go ahead and do a drawing that I could transfer on. If I really was confident in myself, I could just draw it right on here. Okay, so now I was just kind of messing around thinking about what kind of design I was going to put on my mug. So I've got a piece of paper like this, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to determine how wide it is around the mug. So I'm going to take the paper and just wrap it around. And right about there is where the handle is, right? So I'll fold it over right there. Just like so. And that way, because the paper is just a little bit longer than what it would be to make my picture. The other thing I wanted to see was how big of an area the picture would have to go into, right? So I can just take this here and I can put it here, and I've got these areas where I pushed my finger in. Now you don't have to do that, not at all, but I happen to, and so that gives me this area to work in, right? So I've got this here, and so I'm just going to go ahead and mark it. Oh, here, that's where it is, and here. Okay. Hopefully you're being more careful than me. You won't have to lay yours down. I just do that so you can see it. Okay, so I've got that, right? Now, oftentimes kids will ask me for rulers. Well, one thing that you can do is, of course, you could grab a ruler that I've got them, but you could just take a piece of paper. Here's just a piece of paper, right? And I'm going to fold it, and then I'm going to fold it again. And this gives me a straight edge. And it's kind of a useful ruler too, because what I can do is that I can fold it, I can mark it, and stuff like that. So for instance, here I've got one that I was already working on a little bit. So here, here's how wide it is, here's how tall it is. And so then I wanted to divide it up into thirds. I didn't have to even measure because I had this mark here. And so then all I did was take and folded it, finding where those folds fit. And then I was able to just make a mark here and here. I was able to line it up where I had drawn. Remember, this is how I made it, how wide it was. And I could just draw a line, right, here and here. And then this was showing me like panels, like 3 panels. Now, I strongly suggest that you break the mug into panels, that you don't just do it all one thing. Because if you remember from your slab how easy it was to carve deep, right? Well, by having these areas here where you don't carve at all will ensure that, one, you have a good gauge to know how deep you're going because there's something next to it that's not carved at all. And it also adds strength to it. And if you had to put some clay back on it, whatever, it's just a really good idea to have that border. And essentially by making these panels, I've created a border. And I made them a little bit fancier just by rounding them like this. I thought that was kind of cool. And then I thought, well, what am I going to do? And I decided just to do a simple sunflower motif in here. And so to make a sunflower, that was super easy. I just drew a circle like here. Got one that's in the works, so I drew a circle. That's going to be the center part. And then I drew sort of an outer circle. That's going to be a guideline. And then I'd go a petal here and a petal opposite, petal, and a petal opposite. That way they're always going towards the center. Here, a petal opposite. Here, another petal opposite. And then I could just fill in the petals in between. And I've got a sunflower. Wasn't that easy? And then the sunflowers usually have sort of a dip in the center. This one I can have a little stem right here. I could give an indication of a leaf or just leave it as it is. Anyway, so I've got these 3 sunflowers, right? So now the next step is I'm going to darken these up and I'm going to transfer them over to my cup just the way I did to my slab. Okay, I'm going to leave this last one without darkening it up because I was saying just a minute ago that if you were really confident about your design, you could draw directly onto the clay, no problem. Okay, so let's put this on here. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put a little piece of tape right here just to make sure it doesn't slip. Okay, and so just like before, I'm going to rub this with the pencil. And rub, 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 rub. Okay, so now I'm going to take my paper off and get a good transfer that's not super dark, but I can see it pretty well. Now, once again, if you're getting a transfer or having a hard time getting something to transfer well, I do have charcoal pencils, and the charcoal pencils will work very well indeed. But I try and avoid them because, well, you know, charcoal pencils are more expensive, and everybody's just got a lead pencil hanging around. So it's easy to use, working out pretty well. Okay, so these ones, you can kind of see it, hopefully, in the video there, but there they are. And so what I'm going to do is in this last panel, like I said, if you're pretty confident in what you're doing, you could just draw right onto it. So let's see here, I've got my border very lightly indeed. I'm going to go here, here, and here. Okay, and so then if I had, like, let's say my inner circle right there, and give myself a little bit of a guideline for my outer circle, and then go ahead and make my petals. So forth and so on. And then also, once I was done with this, you know, I would go ahead and the ones that I had transferred the drawing, the very first thing that I would do is I would go ahead and go over these ones as well. So find a line and just engrave it in, because that's just going to be a lot stronger. It won't get wiped out near so easy as that little pencil transfer that we had on there. Okay, so now I've engraved in my drawing and pretty much ready to start carving. The only thing is that it's not super straight everywhere, and that's okay. For right now, I just wanted to get the image onto the mug. Now I could take the time to, let's say, you know, line things up, whether that was with a ruler or with some other way of, you know, getting my hand steady and just correcting any of those things. The nice thing about the flowers is that I don't have to worry about them being perfect. That's not, you know, they just have to look good, right? So, but the columns, you know, I have to decide, well, do I mind them being not totally straight, or is it something that I'm really much more concerned about, where I might use a ruler to straighten those things up, measure them to make sure that everything's straight across the bottom, that kind of stuff. It just depends on my level of craftsmanship and what I'm after. So now I'm ready to carve, and so we'll get our tools and begin.